Good morning, everyone. My name is Rebecca Spears. This is Suki Shao, and it's our pleasure to welcome you here today for ProductTank Tauranga. So this is our third session, and it's our first session that we've done live. It's moved in virtual, so it's a real milestone for us, and it's so great to see so many people here today. So thank you so much for coming. So for anyone that's not familiar with ProductTank, it's an informal meetup that brings together the local product community from cities around the world, and all of the sessions are usually streamed as well. So yeah, it's a good way to network and find out about different topics. And it's organised by volunteers and supported by sponsors and Line of Product, which is a training company. So we are delighted today to welcome today's speakers. So we've got Matthew Hattie, Kelly, Dixon and Kieran Sims, and they're from Tauranga City Council. So Matthew is Senior Product Manager and his team are product owners. And they're going to talk to us today about what it means to be product-led in the public sector and how to define and measure success when revenues not your North Star metric. So we're thinking this is a really interesting alternative perspective on products, and we can all learn from it, whatever sector we're in. So please put any questions in the chat as we go, and Suki's going to facilitate a Q&A session at the end. And the recording is available on YouTube through the link that you're watching now. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Matthew.
Thank you. So yeah, just a little quick introduction of ourselves. So I'm Matthew Hattie. I've got around a 20-year background in software delivery or digital, and around the last 10 years of that has been into sort of product and product leadership. So yeah.
I'm Kelly. I've been working in the product space agile for about the last 4 years. I work in the infrastructure and security team. I've been at the council for about a year now. So yeah, it's a different kind of way of doing things, rather than public sector. Yeah.
Nice. So my name's Kieran. I've been in and around technology space, data and technology for the last close to 10 years now. And yeah, I've been, I guess, primarily focused in the product space for the last 4.5 years. I've been at the council for a year. So that's a little bit about us.
So just with who we are at Tauranga City Council Digital, so we're a fairly mature little product agile, well, not that little really, there's around 100 of us, product agile sort of business unit. So we focus on really fast and iterative delivery. So a lot of sort of MVP, we'll embed something that's pretty experimental at the start, measure, have a look at results, or inspect and adapt. And a lot of our teams will use an experimental sort of dual track agile approach to things. So we'll have discovery at the same time as delivery. So we'll be sort of looking ahead at the same time. So those teams can be working pretty intensely. So we're actually pretty mature. We're pretty happy about the way that we work. We're fortunate to have really good support from leadership. So our digital leadership team are exceptional, and we're really lucky to have that. And also with all of our product people, that we tend to what we understand as full stack product, which is all the way from sort of senior product management, where you're working with potentially with some really senior stakeholders and talking about strategy, product strategy, and even sort of some of the understanding what the business strategies are, right the way through to working with the teams and elaborating on right down to the task level. So there's that all the way from strategy and roadmap, all the way through and business goals and everything else, all the way through into the actual tasks, or through the stories and into the tasks themselves. So that's what we consider full stack product people to be.
And of course, as you sort of alluded to earlier, we do have some unique challenges as I guess most of the articles or blogs or any of the sort of product related information that is out there is primarily, I guess, viewed from the profit metric as your Northern Star. So for us, that's a little bit different. Profit isn't the sole mechanism to identify success, but definitely being fiscally responsible with the funds that we have is a huge factor. But it's more based on the community outcomes that we get based on the delivery that we do. So that's part of this, part of what we're doing today is to hopefully crack open that door and sort of shine a light on what is possible in this space in the public sector. Across the organisation, we've got around 60 business units, and for us, we're a sort of a support service within the organisation. So we are across a lot of different information and a lot of different products. I think we've got about 300 different systems. And yeah, so when we're talking about product, we look after a wide variety of different things that can make it quite challenging at times. So it brings up unique challenges. Similarly, being a public organisation, you know, like a lot of the stuff that we do does have a public eye to it, and it is for the benefit of the public, particularly Tauranga. So yeah, with that brings its own set of challenges. And because we have so much on, and with so many different products, etc., there could be quite a lot of stuff in motion, development in motion, and we do have a big focus as well on change management because we are enabling the organisation. So yeah, it brings with it quite a few different unique challenges, and yeah, it's really, really interesting.
Cool. So who's our customer? So we have internal and external customers, obviously. So identifying who the customer is can be difficult because we go right from having our own delivery teams that we work with dependencies. We have other business units where we've got projects that are out in the community that we need to support so they can get through their work. We have the exec team, so looking at the strategy type stuff that they want to introduce, so we work through that with them as well. And then obviously we support the public as well, so we've got things like the systems that they use to interact with us, the public facilities, all those kind of things, regulatory consents that we need to put systems in place to support. So it can be quite tricky to understand who the customers are. There's a lot of competing customer needs, obviously, coming from all different directions. Every person's needs are important, but it's tricky to figure out how we prioritise that work. So we find that sometimes it can be challenging to figure out how we're going to prioritise the stuff that's coming in. Organising the work and figuring out what the competing demands are and what's the most important thing to do can be really challenging, especially when it's kind of, like we were talking about before, it's not about the profit, it's about meeting the needs of our wider communities and the internal business. So it can be tricky, but yeah, there's a lot going on.
So at the end of the day, yeah, product's sort of the same, no matter what you're in. You've got, you know, your customer needs and customer wants, and where they intersect with the business objectives is where you sort of find your product fit. So for us, we've got, as was mentioned by Kieran, we've got 60 business units. So there's everything from transport through to regulatory, through to rates, through to like virtually there aren't really other companies or organisations that have that sort of broad, so many value streams. So we've got these sort of strategies for a lot of these business units, but we've also got an overarching organisational strategy that we try to align to, and there's essentially 5 areas of strategic focus and 3 areas of how we approach those strategic directions.
And yeah, so from our, I guess, organisational strategy, we then distill that down to product strategies. For us, which we have a value stream strategy, because we have so many products and such a diverse range of things that we support. We're aligned based on value streams. So I look after compliance and productivity for the organisation. Kelly's the cloud security and infrastructure, and Matthew's on the customer side. So that's just an operational focus that supports, I guess, alignment and focus, and just means that information is retained in the right areas. And yeah, I kind of use that cup analogy on the right hand side. Is up the top is of course your organisational strategy, and each, I guess, subset of the organisation is aligned to that piece, and each of them together create or work towards the top level organisational initiatives. But without the stuff down the bottom, you don't get there. So all of us are steering the ship collectively towards organisational outcomes for the communities.
Also, current state. So at the moment, in relation to our objectives, we're starting to ramp up the number of teams that we have to be able to deliver on some of those things that we've got in our roadmap. Because the work that we need to kind of get through, we just can't do it with the resource that we have in place at the moment. It's just going to be too much. So we're trying to get that organised, figure out how best to suit the needs of that the roadmap objectives. We've got a big piece of work around the SAP program of work, which is to try and get all the business functionality that we can into one system. So around 20% of that, we're around 20% complete through that at the moment. We've also got a big security program coming through, so we're just starting to get into what that means for the business. Starting to get that off the ground and work towards getting ourselves in a space where we can reduce the threats and vulnerabilities of the business. what we're trying to change, just like Matt was talking to before, the organisational strategy. So we're trying to take a bit of time to look at what we're doing in our teams and understand how that feeds back up into that organisational strategy. So making sure that what we're working on is something that the business has agreed to as being the most important thing to do. So how do we know that we're on the right track? So we obviously get, if we've got understanding what our time to deliver is, making sure that we're delivering on what we said the expected outcomes are going to be, getting that constant customer feedback to make sure that what we're delivering is what the customer expected and what they wanted and that it's working for them, and using things like NPS scores and that kind of thing just to make sure that we're on the right path. So that's where we're at the moment.
Right, and so we talked about sort of our current state, and also we sort of we think about sort of what's our target condition. So where are we going to from there? So that's our strategic intent, and goals of the various value streams. So that's developed alongside the business. So we'll do a bunch of workshops and different things alongside the business to get some ideas of what they want. It's also informed by data. So we think this is how we set sort of strategic intent, the product goals and objectives, and also we look at how we're going to measure things as well. So we've got sort of our current state and our target condition there. And then we try to keep, so what are the steps in between those? So we try to keep things pretty goal orientated in our roadmaps. And this one here looks very messy, and that's intentional because really, when you do a really neat roadmap in a system that builds neat roadmaps, there's an expectation that that's now how it's going to work. Whereas if you just do something that looks like that, it's pretty clear that this is just a draft and it's never going to be anything that isn't a draft. It's also pretty gold, like the actual post-its that are on there. So we've got some sort of ideas. This is one that we did recently with the team as well, just to get some ideas of how realistic it is. So a lot of it is those outcomes are really about just getting to an MLP or an MVP for different parts of what we're developing, and then those objectives as well. What does that look like? So that'll mean all of these staff are onboarded, or we've decommissioned some legacy or something along those lines. So it is really just making sure that we're not sort of getting it down to a feature level or getting it down to the level where there's an expectation of here are the outputs, but much more of that objective and outcome or goal focus. And obviously there's it's going into measuring, and it's sort of another repeat here that we're trying to avoid becoming that feature factory. So really keeping that outcome and objective focus. So some of the things we do as well to measure our success towards those objectives, things like CSAT and MDS, just getting actual feedback from internal and external customers. We do a lot of NPS at Tauranga City Council, and it's really helpful for to help inform some of the decisions, especially some of the detractors give you really awesome feedback. We have some survival metrics on things as well, especially around that technical product performance. We might say if a form gets this percentage of users dropping off that start and then don't finish it, whatever that delta might be, we'll then have an action, and that might be getting together with product people and developers and finding out, we need to drill deeper. So generally, we'll have those sort of survival metrics too, where we sort of start thinking about, if this happens, what's our action? And then, obviously just your regular sort of tracking and usage performance on that. So that's sort of the theory of what we're doing at a pretty high level, and pretty quickly running through it. So we've now got some case studies that we're just going to run through. We've got one each, and talk about how we implement this work, and just show you kind of some real life examples of that. So one of the things I've been working on is our case management for resource consent. So that's where somebody applies for a resource consent, and then we've got to manage that then through the business. So that has to there's a whole lot of interactions that go externally and internally between different parties, and that's why it's sort of in customer, in the customer value stream. And then there's obviously an output from there. So this is just one little aspect of it, and we sort of start getting into that. So we think about, if we think about how this is aligned to our organizational strategy, it's in with, there's a couple of pieces in there around a well-planned city, and also one that supports business and education. So those are sort of two lenses that we need to apply across it to help us make some of the right decisions from an organizational perspective. And then, as I mentioned before, we kind of took down into we work down into the business as well. So the business will have more specific goals They have things like KPIs that they need to meet. So it's just some sample data on the right there, but that's an example of so where they've been completed within 10 days, so a consent, or within 20 days, which might be the statutory limitation, and then ones that have gone over. So obviously we've got some really simple metrics there that we can go, these are the ones we want to change. So it's really clear when we're heading in the right direction or not. Some of the other things are customer experience, obviously, and that we don't make mistakes in it, so they need to be right as well. So yeah, so those are some of the things we might look at on when we're applying those that business strategy. And then down to the actual product goals. So we talked about value stream goals, and we have those for our overarching value stream, but then also for our product goals. So generally I'll work with, and I'll go into a little bit of detail in a minute. So I'll work with our stakeholders and SMEs to put together our product goals. So in this example, we've got quite a lot of goals here because it's a big piece of a big product and a big piece of Tauranga City Council, and there's a lot of different groups that actually need to use it as well, but they're all fairly straightforward. So reducing administration so that we can free people up and free up their time. Being able to tell where something is at any given time, because right now there isn't that visibility, so it's about that visibility and transparency. Keeping us accountable so that it's really clear who's actually got the ball at any given time. And right now there's a whole lot of systems that don't necessarily talk to each other, so some of these sort of really do align. So simple and integrated, and probably automated as well, like those sorts of things, they really do align with each other. And just, so it is about reducing that cost of service, reducing staff time, reducing human error. A lot of those sorts of things will sort of work into essentially what these product goals are. So this is sort of what I talked about workshop. So this might be some of the exercises we might do in a workshop so on the left there, that's around community and staff, and it's also 3 different groups. So I split we had quite a big SME group, so I split them up into 3 groups. And then some of the first stuff we did was really looking at how does the community experience us and what are the pains that the community has when they're experiencing us. Sort of digging towards those problem statements and what the current service and products we offer. And then also in the staff. So how are the staff, what are the pains that staff are getting? And then, so you can see I've done that across those 3 groups. Those are the 3 different colors, the yellow, green and blue. And then bring those back together again and bring the groups back together again as well, and have a look where we've got consistencies across the different groups. So that's where we can sort of say, without any hive mind, we can say, or without any sort of groupthink, we can sort of say, okay, here's where we've been consistent, and those are the things that we should maybe focus on first. There's a bit of a vision there that we put together as well. So that sort of comes in towards the end of the workshops. Generally, we'll do a vision to sort of keep everybody aligned. It's something we can come back to. And on the right, that's where we've done some objective work. So also towards the end, we'll do sort of some work around objectives. And then what I do is I get the business to help prioritize that on impact versus reach. So we can try to keep things objective. And as with everything, all of as you're probably, if you've ever done this, everything will be in that top right quadrant. So then you just normalize the data, you just move the quadrant across, and it's great. You can do it in front of them, and they go, "Oh, right, okay, yeah, can't get away with this." So it's quite fun. I like that. Okay, so here's an example too. So this is where the rubber hits the road on a feature level. So in this particular piece of that, there's applications. So there's the whole process of processing a resource consent, but right up the front is just putting a form in for an application. And so what our goal is to automate that, because it's all sort of PDF paper forms at the moment. So we're trying to get this into online, and then we want it to go directly into the system. Problem with that is we need to know who they are, and we currently don't have any sort of ideas of service. We've got a customer number potentially we can use. So we looked at that. So if we look at sort of the process of going through here, generally we'll start with the current state. What is the obstacle? What is the step? What's the expected outcome? And then what did we learn from that? So it's pretty standard sort of product kata if anybody's used that approach. Yeah, in this case, we're really looking that applicants can be positively identified and automatically billed. And the target condition is staff time and cost is reduced by 50%. And if we actually start digging through this, you probably can't see on the screen too well, But we put something in place and people weren't using it. So we go, well, why are they not using it? And then it turns out, well, agents are really strongly saying they don't want to know, enter the customer number. They don't want to have to ask for it. So that's sort of, where I learned here, the use of the forms low, especially for agents. And then we sort of go in and say, okay, well, we don't know why. What's our obstacle? They're not using it. We don't know why. What's our obstacle? So it's really about learning. So our step is to find out why. We did some surveys. We put together a friendly pilot group, did some direct sort of engagement with some of those agents, and they ran through some tests, and they came back to us and said there was a couple of things. So essentially, especially up front, they don't want their customer number, and then also for the billing, they wanted more billing options. Business accounts don't like to use some of the business billing options we've given them, or payment options we've given them. So here we have the current state where we can't PID without a customer number. So, our steps are we find another way to PID, and the team's been working on that. So they're looking at how we can get up to a 50% PID, because we think if we can get that 50% positive identification, then we can get our target condition and we'll probably actually go past that. But it just means that staff won't need to actually do anything with that, with half of those applications. And some of the early testing we've done, we've got it to 33.8%. So we'll be continuing to iterate on that. So as you can see, these two down here are empty. There's some stuff we're still working on. We've got an 8-week test and process where we can sort of follow that through and start getting that data back. So yeah, just an example of taking an experimental approach and making data informed or data driven decisions. With some different things that we're caring about. So again, with monitoring, so I'll pass this on. I've probably gone on a bit too long. So we'll be monitoring different things like the count of the submissions, how many are we getting, and how many people aren't completing it. So they're falling off at some point for some reason or another. What is the staff time? Is that reducing? And also we'll put an NPS at the end of the form, or a CSAT or something to sort of start giving them an opportunity to give us feedback and get some insights. And a lot of that we try to, as you can see from here, we try to aggregate that and do some sentiment analysis across it so that we can actually get actionable insights rather than a whole lot of anecdotes. You need a lot of data to be able to do it, but it's a good way to turn those text fields into something where you can sort of get something a bit more actionable from it.
Cool. So the piece that I worked on, so when I came in, we didn't actually have a team set up. So I came in to have a team where we kind of didn't have any organised processes. So one area that the business is really putting a focus on at the moment is the security side of things. So we went through, jump to the next one, the process of our product goal is to try and put things in place that will benefit us from the security standpoint. So we want stuff that's going to protect our data and systems. We want to reduce the risk of any vulnerabilities or risks coming in, contribute to the overall security and maturity outcomes that we're looking for, enhance our overall security posture, and ensure we understand our risk profile. So there's a long road to get to that point where we can confidently say we're across everything. So where we decided to start from was security reviews. So our team looks to put in security reviews, so that's for any new systems, apps, or integrations. So where we started at, so there was no formal process. It was prioritised, but in terms of what the business was doing, it didn't really kind of land with what does that mean for me and my team. I'm just doing the work I've always done. And now there's this kind of overlay of you need to make sure that you're considering security and that sort of stuff. So there wasn't a formal process for it. For our team to understand what they needed to know with all these new systems, apps and stuff coming in, there's a lot of digging around to get information. There's quite a few delays because we kind of said don't put anything in until we understand how it's going to work and what the security implications are. But to get that information, it was kind of broad ranging, and our guys are going hunting, looking online, trying to ask questions and that kind of stuff. So it tended to delay things. And also our team is quite often a dependency team. So we support a lot of the other agile teams and business projects in that. So it was managing kind of all this information coming in from different areas, trying to progress stuff, stop starting, all that kind of thing. So we weren't getting to the place we needed to do to be able to progress it. So then we moved to where we are now. So we created a security review questionnaire. So that's basically a list of questions that we kind of went, For each time we've done this, we know that this is information that we've needed to know. So we kind of collated that and put it into a form so then people could come to us prepared with the information that we needed to progress the review. So we implemented a process where people go away, get the information for the questionnaire, and then log a request for us to do the review so that we had a good footing to get a good start on it with the information that we had. Then we kind of came to a point where understanding those dependencies across the team. So teams knew that it could take us up to 1 to 2 weeks to get a full security review done. So put that into your planning when you're looking at delivering on something. Make sure you factor in that, understand what the dependencies are across the team, any deadlines and that kind of stuff. So we knew how to organise them, because the number of reviews coming in just ramped up exponentially when we kind of formalised that process and socialised it. But then we also found at the moment we've kind of come to the place where not all security reviews are going to be the same. So there are some things where we know it's going to be light touch. There's not a huge amount of private information. There's not a lot of third-party integration required. It's kind of internal systems. So now we're at a point where, does everyone need to fully complete the security review questionnaire with all the information, or can we kind of do an assessment? So we're just trying to understand what that looks like. So moving forward, we kind of look at where we came from, where we're at, and what we know. We're looking to take more of a risk-based approach. So that's understanding what the level of risk is when we bring something new into the system or we change some integration. So understanding if it's on-prem, is it public information, is it confidential information, third-party managed, or managed within TCC. So depending on what that is, if it's deemed as low risk, there could be some kind of automation, tick the box, you're good to go, you can carry on. We don't need to do the whole review. We don't need to kind of get that full sign off versus actually we really need to understand how this works, because if something went wrong, that would create a lot of vulnerability for TCC. So we need to make sure that we've got it right. The other steps that we're taking is implementing some security tools to de-risk the environment. So that's bringing in some auditing, monitoring tools. So if something was to go wrong, we actually can jump on it straight away. We understand where the threat is. We know where to address it. We know what we're looking at. So we're not wasting time trying to figure out where that threat's coming from. And also bringing in some tools that will actually set some policies and conditions that need to be met. So you can actually, for teams like Matt, they can build to those policies and conditions. So up front, they know what they need to do. We don't need to check that it's done, because actually the tools will be in place where if it's not built to that kind of thing, it just won't work. So it's kind of upfront. That's what you do to get the ball rolling on what you need to do. So yeah, we're just starting to get into that phase now where we're starting to implement these tools and think about how that works for the business and get that change management going so that everyone understands and knows how we can kind of work together to do things better. So that's where we're at. My team's doing.
Awesome. And then, yeah, from that space, as I mentioned earlier, I'm kind of in the productivity and compliance space. So what we've done is we've implemented a digital signing solution with the hypothesis that, of course, it'll increase compliance as well as productivity by doing so. So our current state, if we go to the next slide in there, is, or our current state was, I should say, we had multiple approaches that were employed by different users across the business. Some people were signing something in, then scanning it, and then doing a whole bunch of other things. There's a lot of printing that was happening, time spent getting a wet signature applied to a document and then scanning it back in. Lots of working across multiple systems and complexity and overhead that users just really didn't need. And anecdotally, it was taking hours or days to get something signed. So what we were looking for is when we go to our future state, there's a single solution that had the ability from an end-to-end perspective to sign, send, and store the contractor agreement, and overall with the goal of reducing the time it takes to get contracts or agreements signed. Yeah, so that's what we looked to undertake. So what we did from there was we broke it down into goals, or we selected a solution that met those needs, and then we broke it down into goals. So as you sort of see here, other than the first two, it's kind of, the first two are kind of like rollout ones, which is sort of have to do in some respect when you're implementing a new tool. But what we did is we broke it down into 5 goals and sort of with the goal that each thing should either improve compliance or productivity. So the first one we focused on there was empowering users that generate high levels of signing. So kind of using that 80-20 rule where 20% of users are likely to generate 80% of the digital signing needs, focusing our attentions more heavily in there, and also changing the way that we support those particular users. So that was sort of a more one-to-one approach where we went out and implemented it for these particular users and then gave them a really thorough rundown on how things work. And then the second part was empowering the rest of the organisation. So the rest of the organisation are probably going to, well, definitely be users, but they'll be users at a point in time. They won't always do it, they'll do it occasionally. So the touch points there were more on a, generally this is a tool and technology that you can do or use. And then after, you know, when you do need it, we've created a whole bunch of support materials that you can consume at your own need. So the goals there around really just getting up and running. And then the next sort of things that we're looking to focus on are creating an ability to sign and commonly used tools and products. So again, moving away from that feature of particular tools or products, but just the outcome is that you're able to sign in these tools and products. So things like the lower level will be set to something like, we know that a lot of our people use either Word or Outlook to sign a lot of things. So what can we do in that space? That's that lower level edition and those sorts of ones. You know, things like Teams, any of the sort of meeting management apps that we've got, those sorts of things. So that's the next level detail around that. And then moving off to a couple of other goals around automatically uploading agreements. So that's a big thing for us. We're really, you know, from a compliance perspective, especially, and also a productivity perspective, records management is really important for us. As we are a public organisation, information needs to be accessible and available when requested. And yeah, by taking the overhead off of users, I guess the hypothesis there is that it just happens implicitly without users having to have to spend time on it. So that's something we're looking to do in the future. And the last one we've got there is really around that productivity space. Is if we know that things, you know, are signed commonly and they do it regularly, what can we do to reduce the time it takes to get those things over the line? So that's the roadmap that we've got here. And the next level of detail is then broken down and worked on in sort of that sprint methodology. So next part is actually understanding once you implement something, whether, you know, it's doing the right things. The screenshot is just it's just a sample one from Google, so there's nothing that's actually happening. So I thought I'd jump it in. But yeah, so we've got some like four sort of surface level metrics that we're kind of focusing on. So first one is around the number of users. So it's all about empowerment and enablement there. And also, yeah, so making sure that we've got the ability for the organisation to be able to digitally sign if and when they need it. And then we're sort of looking at those next two, which are the number of contracts or agreements signed and then the time to complete those contracts. So the number of agreements signed gives us sort of a quantum of, you know, how much it potentially is going to cost us. If we can extrapolate, you know, after 3 months we've signed these many contracts, we can then use that information to plan for the rest of the year. How much is it going to cost us for the year, and then extrapolate that forward as well. Time to complete contracts gives us an idea of, you know, where are users having potential issues, or where can we make improvements. So if you've got the average time and it takes 20 minutes, yep, we know that that's pretty good. But if you've got the max, you know, if something's taking 4 years to get something over the line, maybe there are some internal improvements that we could make. So without having access to that information, you don't know. So it's, yeah, it's really important to sort of capture all of this sort of stuff. And thankfully, the tool that we've selected actually has quite a lot of detail in these particular areas. So that's what we're looking to use to really inform how we take this product out to the organisation and make sure that it meets their needs. And then, of course, we have regular sort of customer feedback. It's another important part of what we've done, especially with those first, the pilot groups, or the first 20% that generate 80% of our signing. We took them through, I guess, multiple sessions to get it up to speed. And there was about, I think, 15 to 20% response rate. Generally, it was positive, but we've used the feedback that they've provided to also inform FAQ information that we provide for users. And yeah, it's a regular ongoing piece. So as Matt said, in the detractors space, if you get something gnarly, maybe it's something that you can improve, or, you know, there's something more to dig into there. So without capturing that information, you wouldn't know. So where we're at the moment, so we are sort of quite early on in this journey. So we've got 245 users that are up and running. That's our sort of pilot heavy users, and we've got the remaining 800 or so 1,250 users in total that are now empowered with a single signing solution. We've got about 400 contracts or agreements that have been signed since implementation. So we can use that information to extrapolate how many we're going to likely sign in the year, and use that information from a finance perspective. And also, yeah, those sorts of things. At the moment, the average time of signing is 20 minutes. So anecdotally, when we heard it was days/weeks to get it over the line, it's definitely a win. But we're going to dig into that a little bit further as we, I guess, get further into this. If that starts going up, it's using those delta points. If it gets up to 30 minutes, maybe that's too much. If it gets down to 10 minutes, that's really great, and those sorts of things. And yeah, we've got an ongoing customer feedback channel, and access, people have access to the right people and information. So we use that information to inform if we've gone. But it's generally kind of, yeah, the scope of, we're all doing a similar sort of approach, but much the same sort of mindset, but it's kind of applied in different ways depending on the teams or the functions that we support throughout the organization. Yeah, so that's how being product led in the public sector works for us.
Back to the start, so we've got the slide.
Yeah,
There we go.
nice.
Should have thought that through.
To put a slider in Q&A. Thank you so much for running through 3 case studies for us to really understand what being product led in the public sector means, and also how it links to the organizational goals that you have. Breaks it down to the value stream as well as the product goals that you have. We do have a question online from Oliver from the UK. What time it is in the UK, but his question, his comment is that my biggest frustration working on public sector project is that senior leaders expect agile delivery, but I fund it in a waterfall way. For example, here's $1 million, deliver it by next year. I'm interested to hear how your funding process works and what you've learned, how to do it better and how to work with it.
Great question.
Great question. We'll start with the easy ones. So we've got, as I mentioned before, we've got some really strong leadership in digital, and the way that they've actually set that funding up is they're funding along value streams, so that we can have a fixed resource and variable scope. So essentially, we're very, very fortunate that we've got that level of support, and an organisation that thinks that progressively. So it does give us a little bit of space in that. Well, we are essentially going, okay, here's our resource, here are all of the opportunities. How do we then prioritise those opportunities? And there's some work that's done at the exec level to help on really, really big pieces to strategically align. But then as that sort of breaks down, that's where we start coming in pretty early on in that piece. But yeah, that's essentially where it is. So it's each of those value streams are funded. So we're funding those resources, and then we're saying what can we actually, what should we do, and what can we do? What can we fit in through that? But yeah, how do you guys experience that?
Yeah, from my experience, it's not so much that's the amount of money you have for one particular thing. It's kind of, these are the things we need to do, and you've got funding for that. You guys can you're empowered to figure out what you're going to get your best bang for your buck and what you need to use it for to make the difference that fits with that organisational work that we're doing.
Yeah, I'm probably going to add too much more. That's exactly how it is. We've got we're funded on value streams, and then from there, it's really understanding where the organisation wants to go, and then driving based on the funding that you've got and the sort of value stream that you're within towards those organisational outcomes, and picking essentially the ones that are highest priority will return them highest value.
And I think that's why the experimental approach is so important, using that product kata and really showing at each step what you're getting for the result of it, and then showing the transparency for people to really understand, hey, this is what agile delivery means, rather than we get this product developed for this money.
You have to do that. You have to make that thing planning up front. That's the end goal. That changes all the time. We can changes all the time.
All the time, yeah. And we do, like you say, with transparency, we take an approach of radical transparency across all of the teams and product teams and development teams right the way across. So it's just so much easier just being completely transparent. There's I'm not trying to gild the lily on anything. It's just about, these are the results. This is finding what that truth is and sharing that truth.
Then what would your advice be for Oliver?
Oh, right. Geez.
Come work at TCC.
All the way from the UK, Tauranga City Council.
It's a lovely place to live. So it is, I guess, it is about maybe encouraging them to look at some of those models. But if you're not, if you've got no leverage in that, it's tricky. You're sort of finding yourself in a bit of a feature factory there. yeah, it's a tricky position to be in, and I guess if you are really judged on that output, it's about trying to bring them back to those outcomes. So trying to get them to be more outcome focused. So when they're saying, so it's about doing those things up front. We talked about those workshops up front. That's really, really key in managing expectations, so that they're not focused on the outputs. Oh yeah, we wanted it to turn pink on a Wednesday, and it doesn't turn pink on a Wednesday. But we're going, well, but remember we wanted to reduce admin by 50%, and we did all our time and motions up front, and we've reduced admin by 45 or 65 or whatever. So we're pretty close to that one, or we've smashed that one. So you're really just looking at those, so bringing it back to that objective focus, that outcome focus, because really that's what the business should be focused on. You've got some really great teams that know how to deliver an outcome. So trying to move the business away from thinking about those outputs, and leave it to the guys and girls, and who can really know how to deliver those outcomes. Think about the outputs and know what to do there. What about you guys? Advice for Oliver?
I don't know how you convince management to change that. I don't know. Like, we're just lucky that we can have those conversations, and we stop and look, and we reflect on if it's working or not, and we have those conversations quite regularly with our management. So whether it's working or not, I'm not sure how you change that if it's coming from top down. They're not willing to have that conversation.
Yeah, I think the only thing for me would potentially be, is there any data that you could use? Like, so, if you're focusing from, very much at an output, perspective, you're only capturing potentially a small piece of the pie, or the piece of the value that you could potentially deliver for that particular outcome. So, I mean, use as much data as you can get your hands on. Sometimes that's really, really difficult, but it's kind of, if you're not, if you constrain yourself to an output, you're not necessarily looking at what else you could potentially do, which could actually drive that outcome even further. So I think embedding data in whatever you do, or considering the higher level outcome more broadly, is probably the way that you would steer that conversation, and just make it relevant to those particular stakeholders. If they care about compliance or productivity, or if they care about bottom line, or whatever it is, like offer up, one output can be doing it in a certain way, but if we try this output, there is a potential. Obviously, it's a potential. It's all experimental. We don't know until we do. With that, and again, cut it up into small chunks like you do in Agile, and sort of iterate, see what it looks like.
I think that's a good point, because generally, if you're managing up, you just want to give them a lot of the information that they need. If you're feeling sort of you're being micromanaged, it probably means that they don't have the information they need to be able to trust you. So it's about passing that data and information up, isn't it? And making sure that builds that trust, where they go, oh, you're actually thinking about all of this stuff. So you can sort of get that trust. So it's a tough job they offer.
Yes, managing up is a tough job. Data and outcomes. Cool. And we've got another question online as well. From Andrew, are you using Scrum methodology in these projects? If so, have you implemented that? How have you implemented that?
Yeah, so I suppose, I guess two of us are, and one sort of hybrid. I use Scrum methodology. So when I came in, there was like no Scrum team at all. So it's all about establishing, starting from scratch. We've got myself as product owner, we've got a great Scrum master, and then we've got a great team as well. So all the stuff that I talked about today in terms of that product around digital signing solution wouldn't be possible without them. And again, sometimes it's so I guess it's hard. It's hard sometimes to get those methodologies right, but that's part of the process, right? Like you sort of have a bit of a crack at something, see if it works, and try something else. If that doesn't work, try something else. And that's sort of be clear on, I guess, what you value as a team, and where you can support the organisation, and then go from there. Have a crack.
In my case, like I said, we are quite a dependency team, so lots of people kind of rely on us to fit in with the work that they're doing. So we've had to just be a bit more fluid in how we approach that, because we can't necessarily be, that's the work that we're doing in this time frame, because there's a lot of dependencies going on, whether we get information, whether other people are ready for us to do the work that we need to do. So we've had to just we've changed, we've evolved quite a bit since it started. So we
Down to 2 week sprints now, at least.
yeah, we
That's
are
it.
doing sprints. Yeah, we do plan. We do a plan for 2 weeks. Obviously, though, if there's dependencies, there can be stuff that rolls over. It can be frustrating, but we've had to kind of take a step back and go, it's not because of what we're not doing, it's actually just because it's just the environment that we're in sometimes, when we've got to do work for others and waiting on stuff. So we do try and make sure that we kind of plan our stories, plan our work, but we just have to understand that we have to be a bit kinder on ourselves if we don't hit everything that we've planned into 2 weeks, because it's not always in our control to do that.
Yeah, and I guess just to clarify on Kieran's point as well, when he came in, his team wasn't necessarily Scrum, but but we did have some Scrum teams working across, and we've kind of got a how we work charter across all of the different sprint teams, and then each of those teams sort of does their own charter day as well, sort of, and we refresh that as well. So with the team that I work with most, they're very, very mature in Scrum. So if you're familiar with Shuha Re, they're absolutely in the restate. So they've been, and we've onboarded a few vendors as well. So we've got some vendors that are actually coming and work, and they actually work remotely, but everything, like, it's very, very close to Scrum. There's a few little pieces that our Scrum Master's here today, and she'll certainly agree that it's very, very close. There's a few little bits, like when we get into that restate, where we go, well, actually, for us, we can change these pieces, but that's only because they're so used to doing Scrum. And I think we looked at it the other day. We've started recounting the sprints a few times. We must be up to like in the hundreds of sprints we've run, maybe nearly 200 sprints or something like that. So yeah, and it's been Scrum, so it's just been practicing those Scrum practices, and they've been great. The team has really good output, really good velocity, but that's not sort of not how we necessarily measure things. It's also about DevOps, so bringing in those DevOps practices and understanding. So it's about like how quickly are we releasing changes, how often do we have a change failure, and how quickly can we recover from a change failure. Those are some of the aspects that really show about a high-performing team. Velocity is velocity, but velocity is subjective between different teams. As long as you can put so much in and go, yep, that's how much we reckon. As long as your estimation of what you can pull into a sprint is good, that's what velocity is essentially for. But yeah, it's those other things that we sort of measure that performance on. But yeah, definitely very, very mature, some very mature Scrum teams. There's some other product people that aren't here today because we couldn't really do more than 3 because it would have been a little bit too chaotic. But yeah, there's some of those that say exactly that as well. They've got some great Scrum teams that they're working with. So
yeah, I think the hardest part with Scrum is probably the mindset rather than the actual process. The process is pretty prescriptive. You do things in a certain time frame, and you have some ceremonies to sort of help align you towards that what you're trying to achieve. But it's like if you've got a group of individuals that collectively have quite an open mindset and are looking to grow it, it's not a problem. The tricky, complex stuff comes when you sort of have some people have a fixed idea of how things need to happen. And it's just about working with them and sort of all aligning together and sort of, all coming together and aligning on what your values are and sort of how things may work and having a go.
Thanks for that. Any questions from the room before I take another one online? Good. Show this one. I've got that and show it for you. How do you, this one is from Steph, how do you manage expectations around delivery dates? When in the process do you commit to a delivery date? I find that stakeholders often demand delivery dates as soon as they pitch their ideas.
Yeah,
that's the trickiest one. Yeah, it's a complex one, but I guess if you've done all the work up front, I think, and you're looking at that sort of goal-orientated roadmap, that's where you probably have your flex. But sometimes there are hard delivery dates, and it's just about breaking it down in terms of what you can get potentially done by that day, or all of those sorts of things. So yeah, I mean, the smaller you break down the work, the easier it is to estimate and to sort of pitch where you might be at a particular point in time. So that's probably the functional way of doing it, managing those expectations where that delivery date and the stakeholders' expectation is the complex part. So, yeah, just conversation earlier.
You probably get this the worst.
Yeah,
I think.
yeah, I was going to say, yeah. What's helped in our team is actually that prioritisation of the work from, especially from the exec level. It gives me space to kind of go, what's the work that you're asking us to help with, and where does that fit in terms of the prioritisation and stuff. So if it's kind of not up there, then is it the most important thing that we should be focusing on? Also understanding, I always tend to go back and go, what's the impact if we weren't to meet that? What's the impact of it? Is it going to be the whole business stops working? Is it going to be that person just has to keep doing something manually for a bit longer? You know, it's understanding what the impacts are of not meeting those dates that the customers come to you with, and having the negotiation around, we've got these other pieces of work on. I mean, we've had cases where we have had to have those discussions kind of at the higher management level as well, to get them to kind of make the call, because we can kind of say, we can prioritise whatever you like, but in some cases, if there's a really competing demands, then it's sometimes best to go upper level and going to go, well, what do you think from the business perspective? You guys tell us what you want us to do first, because these two things seem pretty even to us, but yeah, just get their assistance in making that call. Because Matt will always say that his stuff's most important. And the exec guys are all over this. It's like, if I had a beer for every time.
Oh, you don't even about a dozen beers or whatever. But yeah, I think as well, you know, you need to have those conversations, and people need to feel listened to around those things. So it's about empathizing with them, understanding what they're trying to do, and really listening to people, so that, you know, you're really understanding their problem, and also so they feel listened to. And then it's also about saying, okay, well, here's all of the things that we're working on. Here's why this is prioritized, or this hasn't been prioritized. Here's realistically what you're looking to put into here. And, you know, you can give some really broad and vague sort of estimates. You can work with the team and sort of, if you need to, you can sit down and sort of elaborate some things to at a really high level, maybe at a feature level or a story level, get some ideas from the team, really roughly. They're going to be super rough, but then you can sort of go back to them and say, so here are the things we need to work on. If we jam this in, the team aren't going to wake up twice as smart tomorrow and twice as fast and deliver this. That's not what's going to happen. What's going to happen is we're going to fail to deliver all of these things. So it's about helping them understand as well that we can deliver half of these three things by that time and nobody's getting any value, or we can deliver this one thing and we might have a bit of this other one done as well, and then at least this one's getting value. It's not necessarily your thing, sorry about that, but this is higher priority. So really having those conversations and just taking the time. Sometimes it is just, and it's listening, and it can be really hard to not react with some of the things that people will say, but don't react, just listen to them, and yeah, spend that time with them. And that's, yeah, it can be super hard to not react though. But yeah, that's, I think, how to manage some of those expectations around outputs and what can be delivered.
I'm hearing a lot of education and mindset change that needs to happen, and that's what makes, I guess, product ownership in Tauranga City Council different to product ownership in a big tech company, for example, because you do get to have those conversations with lots of tech stakeholders at different levels of the organization. Yeah, which is really good training for product owners.
Definitely, yeah, it is. Like we said at the start, where you know, all of our product people will be working with everything from senior stakeholders right the way through to our customers and the development teams, so the sprint teams, product teams, or whatever they are. So yeah, it's really, really great experience. It's a great place to work as far as you know, professional development for product people.
Experience.
Yeah, lots of variety.
Yeah.
Steph has a follow-up question from that, very similar to what we said before about the metrics and how to get customer buy-in, well, stakeholder buy-ins to work on the agile and customer metrics. Oh, sorry, let me rephrase. How did you get buy-in from stakeholders to work agile and customer-centric, where there are any pushbacks, and how did you overcome those?
Probably be all you back
Yeah, there was a bit, but again, it is really sitting down and listening to them, explaining what you know, So I had a fairly long and storied career in agile and development as well, and sort of we did a few different things. So we did somehow we did a roadshow thing for a while. There's a few different things we do. So we'd go to the business and buy donuts and to try and make them come. And then we'd work through some analogies. So there's a few that I like to use, stuff around so being outcome focused. We'll say, don't tell us you want a bridge. Tell us you need to get 100,000 people across a body of water every day, because it's about putting them into stories narratives that they understand as well. So for them, being council people, they get that. That's cool. No, I get that. So that's that can be a good one. And going, those classic ones like this is a skateboard into a car via a bicycle, sort of iterative development. So we did a whole lot of outreach around that kind of stuff, and really about actually starting to deliver stuff really quickly. So if you can start building a couple of relationships, we get a little bit of trust in there. And you can start just delivering stuff into them really quickly, even if it is just sort of MVP, MLP, hopefully MLP stuff that you can get in there. People are really happy. They're like, oh wow, you deliver this thing in 2 weeks, or whatever, 1 sprint or 2 sprints or whatever the case may be. And you're just literally working with them. You're going, okay, we're looking to pull some of this in. We've got a rough idea. I've had a chat to you. We don't really know what the details of this are, but we're going to pull something in next sprint and have a look and see what we can deliver at the end of it. We don't know whether it's going to succeed or not, but we'll have something for you to actually play with and test. And if you can start getting a few wins on the board, that's where you start getting that traction. And it takes a long time. It takes a long time in any organisation to get them thinking like that. But it's just that first step has to be taken, and you've just got to, take the leap and start doing it. And you can still have some other tracks going at the same time. But it is starting small too. Some of the stuff we were doing earlier on when we were sort of getting more of the organisation aligned to an agile way of working. What's little stuff? Like I say, it's things that we could get a couple of things done in a sprint, but they were super stoked once we got stuff done for them. They were like, oh, wow, this really works how you guys are doing this. And yeah, you start building those advocates through the business and then leveraging those. So yeah, I think that was kind of a journey to agile back in the originally. I've been there about 4 years, CCC. So.
Yeah, picking off the low-hanging fruits and delivering those results.
Exactly. Yeah. You need to show them how it can be successful and get them to actually experience it, so that they can have that trust. And being keeping it outcome focused as well. If you can get the people that sort of go, oh, that makes sense to me. Yeah. So what do you actually need it to do? And help them work through what's the value to the customer. So even with things, and I've been saying this quite a lot with the resource consent stuff I'm doing, is our customers don't want a resource consent. Our customers want to do something that requires a resource consent. So it's about making that pathway through to that as frictionless as possible. And yeah, it's not, and that works with everything that we're doing. What are they actually, it's at the very end of this, because the business can get really focused on, oh, we deliver resource consents. So that's what everybody wants. Actually, if they weren't required, they'd be quite happy that they didn't. Nobody wants a resource consent. But so yeah, bringing them back to that and helping them understand that outcome. So if we can find ways that obviously we can't just change the legislation, but if we can find ways that we can deliver on that outcome better by making things frictionless on the pathway to it, then it helps change the way that we're thinking. And you can do that with the business as well when they're asking for things, that output, drilling down to that why. There's that 5 whys. There's different things you can do to sort of go, okay, how do we get all the way to the end of that value stream and understand it? And then are there other ways that we can deliver this for you? And then getting them excited about what that process looks like and building advocates.
That's really awesome, because the digital team is being agents of change, really, for the Tauranga City Council, for the wider business to operate more efficiently, effectively, and more focus on the outcomes. Because as a council, it's hard often. It's under a lot of legislation that they can do, obligations for the citizens of this country or this region. Yeah, for you to test their thinking about how they're doing their work. That's really, really awesome for the digital team to have that type of impact within Tauranga City Council.
Yeah.
Cool. This is our last minute. So any last comments from the room?
If not, we just had another. Oh, this is a comment from Andrew, who I used to work with in Xero. We'll take this one. What challenges and opportunities
Are unique to the public sector that you deal with, including the good things? As a wrap up question.
Okay. You guys got any on these?
You start us off.
Okay, I'll start. Okay, so the unique stuff, we kind of talked about unique challenges at the beginning, like, so the breadth of it. If we look at Xero, Xero's got a bunch of different sort of products across there. You've got compliance, you've got security, you've got all of these different sort of products. We've literally got 60 business units, and within there's multiple products. So they're unique. And those are, the breadth of that is just incredible. So we've talked bang on about resource consents because something in front of my mind all the time. But there's dogs as well. So there's like animals and managing animals. So it's just obscure stuff that just, and then there's transport, so roads, and then there's, it's everything. No business or no organisation would ever try to have a product suite that wide. It would just be suicide. No one would try to do it. So, but the business model is terrible. So that's one of our unique challenges. So opportunity-wise, though, and some of the good things as well is, it is really about that trust and confidence with the community. It's not sort of always focusing on how we can increase revenue. We'd be much more likely to use heart metrics versus pirate metrics. They're the ones that we care about a lot more. So it kind of feels nice. That's why I personally got into public sector. I was working for a lot of places where we were making money and focusing on making money, and that was great. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I just felt like doing something different, and it is something where you can sort of just think about, how am I kind of, how is what I'm doing eventually making the community, making Tauranga a better place. So yeah, that's for me probably some of the unique stuff. I'm sure there's more. What do you?
I think for me, the challenge is probably the outward perception of what we do. As if grumbles and the things and all those things. But actually, the opportunity here is like there's such a breadth of things that you can do, or that you can meaningfully make change that you can see, like in your community. Whether that's I don't know, like some of the systems that we work on that support other people to do what they do, so that they can keep the parks and spaces all up to scratch and all those sorts of things, and like aligning those, making those more efficient, so that people get better use out of those facilities. So I think the challenge is more, I reckon, outside looking in is that perception of you work at council. At council, you get such a breadth of opportunities to do different things that really do impact people. They're real people. They're not they're not just a cog in a wheel. They're people that are trying to get to work. They're people that are trying to get to pick up their kids after work, or those sorts of things. So I think the opportunities there are massive, just more from a holistic perspective. But I think that's why I'm here.
Yeah, it's a lot different because you do kind of come in from a business where they've got a particular product that they're selling to someone. You're not really selling something to someone, you're supporting a whole heap of people, a whole city. And so you come into business and you see people that are so passionate about doing something that's not for just the profit of something. It's a lot different. And like Kieran was saying, you just have the opportunity to get involved in so many different areas that you just wouldn't get if you're working for a private company. Just if you're interested in something, you can join up to something, even if you kind of just there as a volunteer to do stuff and just get involved, and it can open up all these doors to stuff. So it's very different to just in a company where they're just about the end goal of that, the shareholder profit or whatever it is. I mean, that's got benefits too. People like doing that stuff, but this has been completely different coming in for me. There's kind of those reservations around. You think what you see from the outside in when you think of council.
Yeah.
It's totally different when you're working on the inside of it.
Yeah.
It's a really cool place to be, and really a lot of people that are passionate about doing what they do for the community.
That's right. Yeah, there's a lot of people that really people don't realise that there's a whole lot of people in council that really care, and they're really trying to do the best that they can. And in an organisation, like I say, that has that's such complexity. But there's some fantastic people throughout the business and some really talented people who are doing a great job with pretty limited resources in a lot of ways too. So So yeah, that's some of the unique stuff around it. But also, yeah, like we say, that's from a product perspective, a lot of it is around just what we're actually measuring. It's more, you know, to really boil it down, it's heart versus thyroid.
This making me think you should reverse that skateboard, bike, car model to car, bike.
They are trying to do that, I think. Yeah, it's kind of, yeah. Now that you think, yeah, it's like car, bus, bike now. Isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, it is, yeah. Yeah.
Awesome answers. It shows why empathy and listening to the stakeholders and customers are so important, and driving them towards the outcome focus of what are we doing for the city, for this region. It's really awesome. I'll give it to Rebecca to close this off.
Yeah. So, yeah, thanks everybody. Thank you so much for coming to our first live session this morning. Really appreciate you being here. And on behalf of ProductTank Tauranga, thank you, for being here. Thank you to Matthew, Kelly, and Kieran for preparing the presentation and giving us a really interesting insight into the public sector. Thank you to Base Station for hosting us, and thank you to Suki for setting up all the technology. The recording's going to be available on YouTube, so please share it with anyone that you know might be interested today, and we'll keep you posted on the next events. And please let us know if you've got any feedback, or if there's any speakers or topics, or any other areas that you'd like us to explore in future events. And looking forward to interacting with you all again. And thanks everyone, and hope you have a great rest of the day. Bye.